JJ Meets World is brought to you by Goof Roof. Noel Scotch Anderson is a professional cartoonist and general creative person. If you, your company, or publication are looking for some great artwork, let Scotch take a doodle at it. Scotch was the artist who wrote and performed our JJ Meets World theme song, a man of many talents who will gladly sell out for you. Logo design, custom caricatures, or full comic books are just an email away. Find Scotch's work and contact information at www.goofroof.com.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
All right, Tucker, when you do this, do me a favor, okay? And I want you to just put like some patriotic music behind it.
Okay.
Okay. I've run for office several times. I've not won, but I love the way that they write presidential speeches in movies because it's nowhere near what they're really like in real life. But I'd like to give you some of my favorite lines from famous presidential speeches. Okay. So all you got to do is just cue up something that sounds presidential. Okay.
I'll get that right now. Here we go.
All right, here we go. All right, this is President James Marshall from Air Force One, Harrison Ford. Real peace is not just the absence of conflict, it's the preservation of justice. This one is from Armageddon. I don't believe they say the president's name in that. For the first time in the history of the planet, a species has the technology to prevent its own extinction. Kind of gave it a nice little twist there.
Yeah, it's got some, kind of ties it in with the Cold War.
Yep. And this is probably the best presidential speech in the history of cinema. Do you know which one I'm going to go for? If you had to guess.
Yeah, I know which one.
All right.
I think so.
Don't ruin it. We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive because today is our Independence Day. Bill Pullman. Independence Day. Yeah, thank you very much. President Thomas Whitmore.
Well, he's got my vote, boys.
I could not stand the sequel to Independence Day. They didn't get anything right.
I didn't even dignify it with a view.
Good for you, because it wasn't even worth it. Great ideas and premise, but just horrible execution.
Part of that must be there's no way that they can recapture that feeling that we had when we saw the first one. Because at that point, there was still this rapid advancement going on in filmmaking. So we were seeing effects that we had never seen before, a type of alien invasion movie we'd never seen before. I loved the original Independence Day when it came out. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. But I just think there's no way that they can effectively recapture that sense of wonder that we had as viewers seeing something new.
Here's also a problem. So in the first Independence Day, it was made to come out at the same timeline as we lived in. It was the world we lived in.
Yeah.
So we were trying to fight them with our technology we had developed to this point. Didn't have anything special. Even, in fact, the way Jeff Goldblum finds the code is he uses technology that already existed. Now, having
modems and the internet, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But in the second one, they have reverse engineered a bunch of alien technology from the crash sites and things like that. And so they've got these super advanced weapons, and I didn't feel connected to that world at all because it's just like, no, sorry guys.
Because the first Independence Day movie, at least when I first saw it, it places you in the position of human species that might go extinct, right? Like, so like that is the That is the real deal. That it's arrived on their doorstep, and the yesterday and today are totally different days, right?
Yep.
That's what they're all going through. But I'm guessing this new one, it just must be like a, big flashy, budgety, sci-fi actiony, like explosion fest, and must not carry any of those intrinsic qualities of the first one.
None whatsoever. There are a couple neat kind of things that they mentioned, which is some of these ships, like these major ships crashed and the aliens got out of them, and so we've been hunting these creatures for the last 20 years because now they no longer have their fancy spaceships and stuff like that. So, there's one that crashes in Africa, and they're trying to get to the site of the this crash, and the tribes that have hunted these aliens down and then put their skulls on pikes. I just didn't care for it.
This is and
Brent Spiner is still in it.
That was my question. Is Brent Spiner in it?
Yeah, but in my opinion, I thought he's dead. I thought that I thought the alien had strangled him, and then he had just used like mind manipulation to be like, release me.
So it is the same like character and everything. He hasn't. They just don't explain why he's still there.
Yeah, he just had a weird psychic link.
Okay, got it.
And Bill Pullman, they make Bill Pullman's character seem kind of like a Unabomber. I didn't mean to talk this long about Independence Day resurgence, but I'm glad we did because I've wanted to get this off my chest for years.
Yeah, it's good to get the evil out.
It truly is. But I will go back and watch the first one twice, maybe 3 times a year, and I will get as much enjoyment out of each viewing.
Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum are entertaining fellows. It's too bad they can't get together for another movie film.
Mm-hmm. I also think that Vivica A. Fox gives a stellar performance in that as well. A Judd Hirsch, who plays Jeff Goldblum's dad, very funny. Mm-hmm. You don't think they pay $10,000 for a toilet? $5,000 for a hammer?
Which Quaid is it? That's in the first one?
It's Randy.
It's Randy, who flies, who basically saves the world because he's the one that is able to take out that one ship.
Yep.
So he shows that it can work, right? And then everyone else figures out a way to do it without doing kamikaze style, right? Or does him going in
that blows up that whole ship,
that entire ship? But like there are other ships around the planet.
Yes, and if you don't remember, we've coordinated using old Morse code.
Okay.
With all these other places saying, "Listen, we're going to upload this thing. You're going to have a small window, but they'll be defenseless."
That's right.
And they figure out that they're doing damage to the ship by just hitting it with their little missiles.
Yep.
But they could do more damage if they get it, right in the soft,
in the
gooey
kisser.
center. Yeah.
Right in the kisser.
And so Randy Quaid sacrifices himself.
Yeah.
By going up there. I love to quote Randy Quaid from that too. I can fly. I'm a pilot.
That's probably what he said in his deposition too. Boy, did he have a meltdown and a half.
Yeah, he did.
Goodness. That's a whole other topic.
Do you think we'll ever see another vacation movie featuring a Cousin Eddie?
If we're lucky.
Hopefully. I mean, we all got to eat, right?
Yeah.
Is he living in Canada? Is Wesley Snipes allowed back in the United States
I think so. I thought his stuff was all cleared up, but I don't really know. Would Chevy Chase do another vacation movie ever? Is his career at that point now where he would need to take more work?
Well, so he was in the reboot of the franchise. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
Or I guess it's not even a reboot. It is technically a continuation of the same franchise.
He's playing the same character with Ed Helms?
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah, Ed Helms is playing Rusty, the son.
Yeah. And
so they visit mom and dad.
Got it.
At one point.
Got it.
And unfortunately, I think that Chevy Chase has completely forgotten what makes Clark Griswold because he is totally and completely unlikable 100% in every moment he's on screen.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame because I would gladly watch anything featuring the Griswolds.
Oh, yeah. And Clark Griswold is great and Chevy Chase is not.
Right. People give the Vacation movie a hard time, the reboot, but I enjoyed it. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. Was it funny enough? You betcha.
How does it compare to Captain Ron?
It's no Captain Ron. It's not going to be
It's not going
to be as timeless as Captain Ron is. And hey, guess what? Good news, because I've been really trying to expand Captain Ron's presence outside of just the film and VHS library. So I have written to a couple of companies that make pinball machines, pushing them to make a Captain Ron pinball machine.
Really? Has anyone responded to you?
Yes. It's all been no, but I'm not going to take no for an answer. And
So I wonder if you could try to package it in more like a
Best of
package
Kurt
of
Russell?
Kurt Russell movies. Yeah. So yeah, it would be like a row of those.
So you'd have
Big
like-
Trouble in Little China.
yeah, in Overboard bonus.
Yeah, Escape from L.A.
It's funny you take Escape from L.A., which is the real lesser of the escape movies. You've got Escape from New York, which is the good one, and then Escape from L.A., which is the one that goes like, what are they trying to do here? But that movie does feature Steve Buscemi, who we want as a guest on the podcast, and I will correctly pronounce his name. He can tell me exactly how. Is it Buscemi, Buscemi?
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to our guests today. Bill Brooks, Greg Carlson, they're going to tell us all about the amazing world of pinball, pinball history, pinball etiquette, which games you should be looking for. Maybe you've got a pinball machine in your basement. You might be sitting on a gold mine. And if you've ever played pinball before, this podcast is for you. There's all sorts of neat stuff that you're going to find out. Plus, we'll give a plug right here, right now for Fargo Pinball.
Yeah.
And I know that after this interview, I immediately went home and said, I am going to be getting a membership to Fargo Pinball, just so you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Fargo Pinball is really awesome, and pinball in general is pretty awesome. And I'm happy that it seems to be making a resurgence, much like vinyl and other things of an era.
I didn't know it used to be illegal. Did that pique your interest? Well, then let's get to the boys on the Pinball Podcast. Bill Brooks and Greg Carlson taking the 10th. It's our 10th episode. Congratulations to us.
This is a moment. It's our 10th
right.
episode.
So get a cupcake ready and listen to this episode of JJ Meets World.
JJ Meets World.
Well, welcome to the show, Bill Brooks, Greg Carlson. I hear we're going to talk a little pinball today.
I hope so.
We're going to talk a lot of pinball.
Good,
well,
fantastic.
as much as you can stand.
So let's start with this. Could you guys tell me about the history of pinball?
So in the U.S., it was the first coin operated. It was like the 1930s, like 31, 32 by Gottlieb. And essentially it was pinball because it was basically pins on a board and people would shoot a ball up and see where it dropped. It was kind of a...
Is it true that it came from Europe?
Yep.
Like the Bagatelle?
It was like, it came out of France, and yeah, exactly.
Like Plinko, but there's no flippers yet.
No, not flippers weren't till like, I want to say it was like 40s, like mid 40s is when the flippers were introduced, and that's when it really got.
Because then when it was tested in the courts, it was the ability to flip that made it not a game of chance but a game of skill.
Oh yeah, we're jumping ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal.
The dirty days of pinball.
So these original pinball games, did it still have the plunger? Is that what you call it? What do you call the thing you pull back? Okay,
absolutely.
So did it have a plunger, or did it release from the top down?
So the plunger wasn't introduced until I want to say late 1800s, something like that. But like basically everybody knows it as having a plunger. If you go back far enough, I don't think it had a plunger if I remember correctly, but it was the key was the coin operated, when you could start putting money in and potentially get money back from the skill of simply launching a ball.
So you're putting a penny in there and watching it. I assume a penny because we're talking about like the 1930s.
We'll just say a
dropping
pence.
a dime, right?
A pence, a tuppence.
Yes. I gave all 2 bits into the machine. So
We lost the farm at pinball.
people must have gravitated to this pretty quickly. I imagine pinball became something that had huge popularity right off the bat.
It was huge. I mean, and it has gone through a resurgence now. But back in the day, it was every bar was putting in a pinball machine because it was essentially a form of gambling. So the house could take a little, and the player could potentially win a little. So
you could win. You could win on pinball, like win your
Absolutely.
money back or more.
yeah, that was the way it was, and it was considered for a long time. Kind of backroom, like not savory characters played pinball, and it was gambling, and for a long time it was illegal in the U.S. And it didn't become legal again until the late 70s. And there's Drunk History does a great bit about how pinball became legal again from a guy named Roger Sharp, who had like the shot heard around the world to prove to the New York, I want to say it was like the New York Gaming Commission, or it was one of the New York commissions, to say that no, pinball is a game of skill.
Right.
It's not simply
because he
luck.
could just play forever on one ball. I mean, Roger Sharp was like the legend.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
His kids are like in it now, right?
Yeah, Josh Sharp is one of the guys who runs the IFPA, which is the Internet Flipper Pinball Association.
Okay.
Sexy name too, I know.
So
That was the first idea for the podcast title that we were going to call this, but now we stuck with JJ Meets World.
yeah. So I guess to me, pinball is. I was born in 1983, and everywhere that I went as a kid had a pinball machine. Some places wouldn't.
What was the first one you ever saw that you remember seeing? That's a question I ask everybody about pinball. Is like, what's the first pinball game that you remember?
Yep.
Not even playing, because I told Bill my parents never let me play pinball. They discouraged it. So, but I want to know what was the first one you remember.
Billy's Corner Bar had in Vergas, Minnesota, had an old machine that looked like it was something out of like a Star Wars ripoff. So it had a gentleman on it who had really broad like shoulder pads that angled back in, and I feel like it had a space theme to it.
There were a lot of those.
Oh my gosh, those were hot.
And I remember that thing was around forever, and people constantly played it. They had pool tables and they had a jukebox. They didn't have anything else other than that pinball machine, though, that was constantly being played. And, of course, after that, there was a Caddyshack pinball game that was at the Cormorant Pub that I must have put $200 into at one point.
Was it called No Good Gophers?
Or
Yeah.
teed off.
Or
is
Teed
other-
Off
one
or
of
the two that were...
Yeah, the two manufacturers always ripped off each other. They're
right.
like, "Oh,
Because I
gotta
don't
do
think there
two."
was a licensed Caddyshack one, titled one. It was one of those two.
Yeah,
Teed
but
Off or No
it
Good
had the
Gophers.
gopher, and it looked
The
like
Gophers
you're.
laugh at you.
Yep. So
Mine was at the Giovanni's in North Fargo that used to be next to Ben Franklin, and they had Medieval Madness.
Nice.
And the thing,
Very popular game.
So when I thought we should do a pinball episode was when I went to Bill's business. Greg's wife Katie was having her birthday party there, and this kind of blew my mind. I walked up to, you have Medieval Madness
We do.
there, and I was like, this is different. And I think the one that they had was missing pieces.
Oh, yeah, quite possible.
missing parts, because there's like a dragon in there and other stuff. I was seeing all these things in the one that you have at your business that I did not recognize. And so I'm guessing the Giovanni's had a really old, poorly kept,
Poorly
Medieval
maintained,
Madness.
yeah. That's always frustrating. I've played pinball games that aren't working, and it just frustrates you. So that's why it's an amazing thing to have a business like Fargo Pinball, because the machines are going to be maintained. They're going to be operational if they're turned on.
Yes, and then as soon as someone hears this, they're going to go and find out, why does this one down?
This
This is terrible. How could you?
So okay, so let's dial it back a little bit. So pinball is proven to be a game of skill. And it expands even further.
Huge. I mean, it was unbelievable. And it was unbelievable how popular it was, because you couldn't go anywhere without running into a pinball machine for a long time.
You said there were like kind of two golden ages.
Yes.
The 70s and the 90s, kind of.
70s into the 80s, and then the 90s was the resurgence. And especially because once it became legal again in the 70s is when people were like, oh, we can, it just exploded, because they're like, well, we can put them out everywhere now. This is awesome.
When did licensing become a big thing? Because nowadays it seems like there's a pinball machine for everything that you love.
Yes. You can get a Supreme pinball machine coming up too.
Really?
Yes, and I had to find out what Supreme was from my son, because I'm like, because we get these things about machines coming out, and I'm like, Bill, what is my son's name's Bill, and I'm like, what's Supreme? He's like, oh my goodness, it's like the greatest brand ever. And then you like look into it further, and you're like, you got to be kidding me? Are you serious? So it's
I don't even know what that is.
Is it? Tell us about it.
It's just like block lettering logo that they put on like bricks or like really cheap T-shirts and charge an outrageous amount of money for it.
So there's no characters associated with it.
No.
Okay.
No,
It's
and
basically a logo.
It's basically a logo, and the manufacturer, Stern Pinball, who is doing it for Supreme, basically took a pinball machine that wasn't selling as well and just rebranded it this Supreme logo. So I know the young kid, the cool kids in school are now all ready to play Supreme
I'd say the
Pinball.
70s was the decade when
Yes.
when licensing really took off.
Yeah.
When you had, Kiss and a lot of Marvel Comics ones. There was a Hulk pinball game, a Spider-Man pinball game.
Harlem Globetrotters.
Playboy.
Playboy.
Had a
Oh,
few.
yeah.
There was that Playboy pinball was in the Dutch Made Grill on 8th Street in downtown, just north of or south of downtown Fargo. I remember
Dutch-made
that.
grill.
The Dutch Made Grill.
There's
on 8th
some
Street.
history for you.
Where Nicole's Fine Pastry is now. Yeah.
Nicole should get a pinball machine.
They should get a pinball machine.
Well, and so that brings up the fact that to me, a pinball machine, when I think about one, I think about like something that makes a fair amount of noise, and that's part of the draw of pinball is that you've got these flashing lights and dung 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 dung, dung, and just the bounce and the everything that's being done, and so I can't imagine that there were high class establishments who were clamoring to get a pinball game in until people started saying, you know what, you need to get one in here. People love this. You don't meet anyone who says, I hate pinball or I don't want to play pinball. Because there's something for everyone there.
Yes. And you're on your feet. And we always, especially with kids nowadays, they're on their tablets and we're always saying, hey, this is an actual physical game. You can play, you're on your feet, you're having a good time, you're controlling it, and the game never ends. So like arcade games eventually, like Donkey Kong, you can get to a kill screen, which is basically the end of the game. But pinball, you're just chasing a score the entire time. And when you were talking about high-class establishments, that kind of especially in the 70s and early 80s, there was a place in New York, if I remember correctly, it was the Broadway Arcade, which was like this arcade pinball haven that the Rolling Stones would swing by, Blondie would stop in and play. And so it was, it was everywhere. And everybody wanted to play it. And especially if you were a celebrity, you wanted to be seen playing pinball. There's a famous Frank Sinatra picture, and this goes back, it's almost like back to his like Rat Pack Mob days when he did a whole spread playing pinball of photos, yeah. And so it had a little edge to it. But
there's something I think should be added to the internet is a kind of a database like the Internet Movie Database, but movies that have pinball games being played in them. Because I started to keep a spreadsheet years ago, and anytime I saw a character playing pinball in a movie, I would try to identify the game if it was possible, and then I would just put it on the spreadsheet and just say, in this movie, a character played this pinball game.
Oh yeah, and you can get on, like there's a site called pinsite.com, which is for like the hardcore pinball dorks like me who are like, oh, in this movie? Yeah, exactly. You can go in there and start searching it out and finding out exactly what movie and what pinball machine is, and you post a form, and then after like 6 people like troll you, you finally get to an answer, and it's like, oh no, it was this one.
Greg, what would then be one or two standout appearances of pinball machines in a movie?
Oh man, that's you're gonna catch me up. I'm gonna need some time to I didn't come prepared to answer that one. But
May I start with one?
Yeah,
Sure.
of course. It's your show, JJ. Your name is in the title.
How about Tommy? The Who's musical
Right, of course.
featuring, the song Pinball Wizard, and that was by Elton John.
and the Tommy game is currently available to play at Fargo Pinball.
Fargo Pinball.
Nice tie
There's
in
a little
there.
plug.
Yeah,
Little
well,
plug
and
for you.
Moorhead Theater over there.
There, yeah, Minnesota State University Moorhead.
Yes, they just
is
did a production
just finishing a
of
production
Tommy.
of Tommy.
There you go.
So did they consult you at all for their production? Did they look for a pinball game, or did they just build one from scratch?
They were wondering if there were any cabinets available, and we sent them some links to say if you want to buy a cabinet, just a cabinet.
Right.
We've got machines, but
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were more interested in just the cabinet to build as it was.
So they could
for the
light it up
production.
the way they wanted it for the
Yes.
production. Yeah.
Do you guys know anyone in the pinball industry that we could send requests to for like, please make a pinball machine based off of this? Do we have an insight?
Well, I'm sure.
I've got- yeah, absolutely. I can
Stern
send you-
must get requests daily
Oh,
from people
yeah.
saying, "I wish you would."
They'll
make
never make mine, but
What's
I
yours?
want Spider-Man and the X-Men and Arcade's Revenge. That
Right,
storyline
that
in that video game,
Yeah.
because in that storyline they're basically
Yes.
playing inside of a large pinball
Yep.
machine. And I think that I would love to see, like with the arcade, his face and Colossus at one point gets forced into like turned into like the proletariat or something like that.
You could base it on the Pinball Funhouse. It would have a similar, like the face
Yeah.
of
that's my
the
favorite.
character. I
That's
know you
my
got that one
absolute
too. That's a
favorite
very
game. That
popular
hooked me.
game.
That would be
And
awesome.
that's one that I think you universally see everywhere.
Yes.
They must have made tons tons of those machines.
They did. That one's got, because you got Rudy, which is basically a carnival barker that just taunts you the entire game, and it's so creepy, like American Horror Story kind of creepy look to it. That
ventriloquist dummy looking
yes,
thing.
it just haunts you, and you just want to destroy that game because, at least as a kid, that was we'd go to Joe Sensors in Minneapolis, and that's what they had Funhouse, and literally I could not scarf down my food fast enough to go try to beat up Rudy.
So what happens to pinball when the modern arcade starts to fall? Because the early 2000s were not kind to arcades.
Home gaming systems killed it for a while.
That's what at first
Did it
was
put everybody out of business except for Stern at one point? Was
Yes.
Stern at one time the only
Stern
manufacturer?
was the only manufacturer
for a
of
while.
pinball machines for a while.
Yeah.
And that wasn't until, if I remember correctly, 2013 when another manufacturer came out. So what happened was, to get back to the history, so 70s were hot, 80s. Pac-Man hits, Space Invaders, all the arcades hit, and so pinball takes a significant hit at that point.
Right, because Pizza Hut, it takes up less space to have a pinball table than a video game cabinet. You can put two of those in.
You can put two arcade games,
and it was just so popular.
Yes, and so you could go to they had a Moon Patrol at it was the Pizza Hut carryout for a long time on 25th Street, and I was like, oh, Moon Patrol. I think I went there just to play Moon Patrol for a while, and they kind of looked at me like, are you going to eat pizza? Or are you just, what are you doing here? It's like, I'm playing Moon Patrol.
You're getting your money anyway. Don't worry about it.
Like, I'm putting money in the machine. I just want to get to the end of the game. But anyways, and so what happened was, but then licensing really took off in the 90s. And so 90s, we saw the resurgence of pinball again. Adam's Family pinball machine was
more games of that were manufactured than any other pinball game to that point in history.
Like Terminator and
Terminator
Creature
2,
from the Black Lagoon was at West Acres Cinema, and that was, I just love the theme. It's all about theme for me, and I love the Creature from the Black Lagoon game because it was a drive-in movie theme. So it wasn't just the creature; it was the fact that all the gameplay is based around the idea that you're at a drive-in movie, sneaking it in the trunk, or you're trying to make out with your date, that kind of stuff. Visit the snack bar.
Yes. And the Twilight Zone was just a monstrous hit. So that in the 90s, it came back, and you saw tons of licensing. Everything was basically licensed in the 90s, except for a few machines that weren't. And then PlayStation 1 came out. And that's basically what killed it, was when people started shifting their ideas of entertainment to, hey, I'm going to go out for entertainment. We're going to go to the movie theater. We're going to go to the bowling alley. It shifted to, I'm going to stay home with my friends and play PlayStation, or I'm going to play GoldenEye with my friends at home. And that was part of what kind of killed pinball in the 90s, as you saw revenue drop off, and the maintenance associated with pinball is always there. And so they just couldn't make it go, except for Stern, which they came really close to going under. And they just kept pushing and pushing, and then all of a sudden, it's almost like society, we saw a flip now where people are more encouraged to go out for entertainment again instead of staying home, because you're like, well, I've been shopping on Amazon all day. I really should go see if the sun is out.
There's got to be a nostalgia factor too, the cycles of how the vinyl resurgence.
Yes.
And pinball, physical pinball is. There's so many games coming out now. The games don't even have to be that awesome. They just if they have a good theme, they'll do well.
Yes, it is definitely a throwback vibe, and especially the generation that's saying, "Oh I can't believe you have this game. I met my first girlfriend playing this game at the bowling alley. I got to play it again. Maybe she'll come back in or something." And it's like, okay, all right, we'll keep it going.
And I think so. I'm going to go deep into the psychology of pinball. Pinball is probably the first game that you played in an arcade because your parent didn't want to give you a quarter for you to waste in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They let you go and just pound the flippers for a little while.
Yes.
And you felt like you were playing the game, right?
Yes.
And so if you really dig back into your psyche, the first video game you probably remember, or I guess, what do you call them? What would you call
arcade
them?
game.
Arcade game is probably pinball. And then you begin to associate with the fact that it's everywhere. Because I know plenty of places that don't have an arcade game, but Donkey Kong, like you said.
Oh, yeah.
But they do have a pinball machine. So people probably associate that with their childhood. Nostalgia is a big part of it. And now that licensing is becoming so big again, they're seeing things that they loved from their childhood now in a playable form. So it brings it to that next level.
Yes, it's unbelievable how the resurgent has been, and the licensing has been, and a lot of companies are realizing how, and especially bands, because bands are huge into pinball right now, and they realize how popular the pinballs are now, and how well it can get their name out there.
And you've got a couple right now.
You've
got Metallica,
AC/DC, Tommy.
Because the ones in the pipeline, Iron Maiden
just came out.
Isn't there a Van Halen in the pipeline? I heard a rumor. I just heard a rumor.
Not that I know
That
of.
you know
They-
of, okay.
you got to determine who is it going to be, Van Halen or Van Hagar? We don't
Would
know.
be, well, true. I was guessing Van Halen.
But
More vintage.
yeah, no, but Iron, and then Tommy, of course, as well. But they've been Alice Cooper just came out with a machine too, with a boutique company that's been around for a few years. So yeah, there's that retro feel. There's that I want to introduce my kids to what I had in my childhood, and the idea that you can't emulate physics of an actual ball, a ball bearing flying around inside a machine. Yeah, you know, a lot of times, and that's kind of what happened with the arcades, is because like I remember as a kid on Super Nintendo, you could get the T2 arcade game, and so instead of going out, it's like, well, I can stay at home and just play it at home. So
I used to have a copy of Sonic Pinball on my Sega Genesis.
Yes.
And then there were pinball. That's what I'd like to hear about. Maybe games that emulate pinball games. I know for a while, maybe you still are, but Greg, you were really into an app.
Yeah,
that would fully recreate like a 3D.
They do. Yeah,
version.
Farsight Studios is the company that puts out a pinball app where they do a 3D scan of the table. They get all the electronics for the audio. So it's kind of if you don't have access to a certain game, you can play this virtual version of it, which Bill and I both agree it's not the same because it's not physical. It doesn't give you the weightiness of being at a table and kind of that moving around part. But it's just sort of like a placeholder if you don't have access to a game that you love.
yes, yeah, you can try it out and then come to Fargo Pinball to play the actual machine and not the emulated machine.
Exactly. Well, they have these crazy emulators too that they'll load up with multiple games, and I'm not interested in that myself.
It's just physics. It is very cool if you want to like try something, but it's a treadmill versus going for a walk in the park.
Right.
Do you have pinball in your homes? Do you have a pinball machine?
I did at one time, and then my wife got a sewing room, and we got Fargo Pinball.
That makes sense.
That's a good upgrade.
She loved the idea.
Had to start a business to keep your pinball machine set.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's how we got started. I was a collector. My brother was a collector, and then there's a guy by the name of Scott Nelson who had Fargo Pinball.
He started the downtown one.
He did. And I was member number one. I remember when it was going out. It was like me and a bunch of the other pinball guys in town are like at the window looking in like, hey, what's going on? Can we come play? As the machines are just sitting there. And so it was going great. My brother and I do all our own maintenance on the machines, and Scott would take the machines to Walker, Minnesota every weekend.
I remember talking to his wife about that.
Yeah, and that got to be, you're looking at 4 hours in the car every weekend plus 300 pounds of pinball machine you got to move. And so he eventually decided that he was tired of driving, more or less, and he wanted to spend more time at his lake place. So my brother and I approached him.
How did you and your brother learn how to do the maintenance?
I've burned myself a lot of times with the soldering iron. You ever stepped on one? That's the greatest feeling ever, and it reminds you of it every time.
So you're self-taught for the most part. That's pretty amazing.
Self-taught, and then the internet, the internet forums and Pinside have been a great resource. But a lot of it is just trial and error. My first pinball machine that I bought there's a place called Moorhead Liquidations, and they do K-Bid, which a lot of people know about.
I'm on K-Bid pretty much every day.
Oh, they had a Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man machine over at Moorhead Liquidations, and I got it for like $200, and it was just trashed. I mean, absolutely trashed. And that's the machine I learned on, and I spent way too much money and way too much time putting it back together. And I told my wife, I'm never doing this again. This is it. I'm done. And then like 2 weeks later, another one came home, and she just gave me that look that every wife knows what that look is, where you're like, you gotta be kidding me.
And so when you're restoring something like this, especially nowadays, let's say you get a classic machine in, are there people who are parting out old, sorry to let you go, but this machine no longer is good for anything except for parts? Or has 3D printing changed that a lot?
So all of the above, because there is like a cottage industry that they still make pinball parts. And there's a number of manufacturers out there, which is awesome to have. But there are a lot of times where it's a part out. Or there's like, we always joke, what was the name of that movie? The Core? The Unobtainium.
Oh my God, I just watched The Core yesterday. I can't believe someone brought up The Core.
I need like $5 billion. Will you take a check?
Yeah.
What is it? What is it called? An avatar?
Oh, it's unobtainium in Avatar.
Okay.
Too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that was it?
Unobtainium is a term that's more. It has more utility than just being in Avatar.
Got it.
The idea of some myth. It's like vibranium or
Okay.
adamantium.
Got it.
Virgil is the name of the ship they designed with it. No big deal. Keep going, Bill.
No, and then the guy recording on the end, no one's going to ever hear this.
Yeah. Stanley Tucci, Aaron Eckhart, Hilary Swank, and Richard Jenkins. And so before you look at it, you're like, whoa, God, a lot of these people have got some pretty great credits and Oscar nominations or wins at this point. So it was just a perfect little. Only DJ Qualls is the only one who really has fallen.
What happened
off
to DJ Qualls? Come on, the new guy, was that the name of it?
That was,
The new guy
with Eliza Dushku. That was great.
was
I
a
had a
fun
lot
movie.
of fun. at that
Road
movie.
trip with
Yes, with
Tom Green.
In the scene with Horatio Sands and the
French
powdered
toast,
sugar French
yep.
toast, and DJ Qualls has the great moment where he's like, "It's good,
It's good.
Yeah.
DJ Qualls Pinball. Maybe it's there. I don't know.
Featuring Hot Pockets.
Oh, Bill, I like your style already. So, but
I spent all my time watching movies and playing pinball growing up. That's it.
that sounds like a pretty great
It's
childhood.
finally nowadays it is, but then back in the day it was like, oh, you should get outside and
Right.
play some sports. And I'm like, I'm allergic to the outside. All right, fine. Go into the smoky arcade and play pinball. Oh, okay.
So, tell me about a holy grail of pinball. What's something that if you were to walk into an old pizza place in Brainerd and they just happen to have a for sale sign on an old machine, what's something that you would look at and go like, I don't even care how much money they're asking for it. We need to get this machine.
Oh my goodness. We've been blessed. We've run across a lot of the machines we've wanted that we've.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an older one that I can think of a new one, the Big
What's the new one?
Lebowski.
Oh yeah, right.
pinball
We talked
machine,
about that last week too.
which has got a whole backstory that lawsuits.
It's
and-
a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame that the company that was going to manufacture it ran into the laws of the Dutch
Economics,
and right.
What?
It's a company based in the Netherlands that was manufacturing, and right. You know the story
Yes.
a little better than I do because there were
Always
so
getting
many
foiled
people
by Dutch law.
so many people excited for a Big Lebowski pin, and it was beautifully designed. The cabinet's great. The sides of the cabinet are the rug. I have the rug design on them. The back
came
glass
with
is
the rug,
awesome,
too.
and it came
Yeah.
with the rug. It's just, but what happened?
So they were contracted with a manufacturer to make the Big Lebowski pinball machine, and they got through 40 and shipped 40 of these machines. And people had, and we're getting into the drama of the pinball world.
Please do.
Oh god! And people had been paying up front upwards of $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 up front for a machine in full. And well, all of a sudden the manufacturer comes along, and there was some not licensing, but issues about the next game they were going to make, which was Bride of Pinbot, like the future one. And then they got into some disputes over the cost of actually producing Big Lebowski. And so the manufacturer basically said, we're going to need $1,000 more per machine. And Dutch Pinball was like, nope, you've signed a contract. That's the way it is.
Right.
And then lawyers got involved, and it
Kinda
was a sticky
killed the-
situation. at that
It sort of shut it down
Yes.
for now, as far as we know. Like
Yeah.
only those 40 that are out in the wild.
And they were holding 40 in the manufacturing. It's like 40 or 50 were being held at the plant and as like hostages.
Have you played one?
I've played them at Pinball Expo in Chicago. It's super cool. The call-outs are awesome, and Lebowski is such an amazing movie that it's just makes you smile the entire time you're
Does
playing.
what kind of electronics are on the display? Is it it's not like
it's LCD.
So does it have scenes from the movie like Guardians or
It does
the new Star Wars?
I think it has a couple.
Okay.
It was weird. I think, yes, they have scenes.
Because that's a hot trend right now is you get the scenes from the show or the movie right in there.
Yeah, right in the game. And you're like, oh, this is awesome. But no, they've got scenes, but it was weird. They couldn't use the original music. So they had people fake the music.
Yeah, that's not as much fun. I think that's
not,
what's
but
great.
it's still-
Like in the Guardians game, you're really going to hear the Jackson 5, not a sound-alike or a Muzak version of the Jackson 5.
Correct. Yeah, but you won't actually hear Star-Lord. That's a fake voice.
That's
they got.
not
They went the other
Chris
way.
Pratt.
But yeah, no, but that would be, if there is a grail, that would be it, just because you basically can't get it, and the movie's fantastic.
Yeah.
Older ones, I mean, yeah, it's easily gettable, but for me there was Slugfest, William Slugfest. You can still get them and you can find them, and that's one if I ran into it and it had a good price on it, I would buy it in a heartbeat, because that was the one where you could win baseball cards
What?
while you were playing. It was basically a pitch and bat, so it was just one flipper that was a bat, and you'd hit it and try to hit home runs and whatnot. And if you did well enough, you'd get it's like, Wade Boggs, this is the greatest day of my life. And you'd win the cards playing the flipper game. So
That's pretty sweet.
it was awesome.
I need to bring us back quick to earlier in the conversation. Greg, did you know that on pingeek.com they have a database of 504 movies?
Okay, good.
That also lists the pinball machines that are there.
I'm so
and
relieved.
It gives you timestamps in the movie where you can find it.
I'm so relieved to hear that, because I've been looking for a place where anyone could contribute, like a Wikipedia version of it. You could just keep adding to it anytime you see a pinball game being played in a movie.
So, for example, in the movie Fargo, the 1988 game Time Machine from Data East is in the bar scene at the beginning of the movie. Someone is playing the pin in the background behind Steve Buscemi.
There you go.
Look up Maximum Overdrive and see what they have.
Heck yeah.
'Cause there's the scene in Maximum Overdrive where the guy bites it while he's in the arcade at the truck stop, which
Yep.
is still a movie that haunts my dreams today.
Oh, me too. I remember the USA Network used to play that exclusively from 2 to 3 a.m. like
After
somewhere
Up
start
All
there.
Night?
Yeah. And that's the first time I saw Maximum Overdrive, and I started to fear machines in my home. And I always thought, like, one of the best parts of Maximum Overdrive was watching that little tiny the gun that was mounted on what was pretty much like 4 wheels and a plate, the little military thing, and it just showed those. And you're like, oh, I hope that gun doesn't get there in time.
So, Maximum Overdrive at Knight Rider 1976 is the game
Nice.
that plays itself in multi-ball, which is odd because this is not a multi-ball pin.
There you go.
And they also list Pokerino from Williams, 1978, as being in that movie too. Must be in the background somewhere. McHale's Navy had
there's a classic.
Meteor and Action. Action is about... This is a really, they have a ton of detail here.
Okay.
Action is about 17 minutes into the movie. Meteor is about half an hour from the end of the film. This is pretty complete.
I want to say there was a Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man pinball machine. I want to say it was in the Great Outdoors.
Oh,
With
That's
John
one of my.
Candy.
it's one of JJ's favorites.
It is.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my dreams is to go to that resort at one point, which still functions today.
Do they have the what is it, a burger that he eats?
No, the old 96er.
Yeah.
That doesn't actually exist, but I've got a shirt that says I ate the old 96er.
It's a steak, isn't it?
Yeah. Has
Which,
anyone ever
like,
eaten it?
locally,
Oh, in my
the
lifetime?
s-
God, no.
That's
The
right, because
Smokies-
he has to eat some of the fat.
He has to eat all the fat and gristle that's left.
Yeah, you can't leave that behind. My good friend Matt Dreiling gave me as a birthday gift one year the ringer tee from Smokies that says I almost ate the whatever their biggest steak size was, and then he got one that says I did eat. I ate was the red ringer, and the I almost ate was the blue ringer. So I got the I almost ate.
Out of just your knowledge, has there been a John Candy licensed? Has there been an Uncle Buck or a Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Spaceballs.
Oh, there must be a
probably.
Spaceballs. There must be.
There
not
hasn't been.
really.
No, not yet, which is an absolute shame.
Yeah.
I mean, that would sell.
Yeah, you would think that Mel Brooks would have
Right,
gotten
they could
behind
just
that.
right on the side of the cabinet could say Spaceballs, the pinball game.
Yeah.
These companies that manufacture pinball machines, do they only do pinball machines? Or are they also in like slot machines and other licensed gaming machines?
It's actually interesting you mentioned that, because Williams Pinball, which was the pinball machine in the 90s, which was they had all the Medieval Madness was a Williams pinball machine. They quit making pinball machines because their slot machine division was making a whole heck of a lot more money, and it's still
shit. It's a slot machine. No, get ready. The game is to put your money in this hole. Yeah,
which is what pinball used to be, and now you got to have skill to play, and it doesn't pay you out anymore unless you do well in a tournament, and then of course you can do okay. But no, they're still in business today, just making the slot machines, but they sold off all their copyrights to a group originally out of Australia, and now they're remaking Williams machines. They remade Medieval Madness, so there's a remake of it that came out. We have an original out of Germany that we had brought in, and the remake you can still go out and buy it today. But no, currently between the two major manufacturers, which are Stern Pinball and Jersey Jack Pinball, no, it's strictly pinball. There's two other manufacturers. American Pinball just came out. They've got a Houdini pinball machine, which looks absolutely amazing, and I've played it. It's fantastic. Spooky Pinball has got the Alice Cooper, and they did a Rob Zombie machine before that. And then Chicago Gaming is another one that's remaking Medieval Madness, Attack from Mars, and they're going to do Monster Bash, supposedly, which is has Frankenstein and all the old monsters.
The Universal Gang, except they're a rock band.
Yes,
it's kind of a kooky theme, but it's fun.
It's highly collectible and highly sought after, and it's a good time.
So, would you guys tell me about pinball etiquette? So, I would consider myself a casual pinball player. I couldn't tell you the last
Pinballist?
time I put in. Yeah, I'm not. I am
Pinballer?
not an aficionado of pinball.
Not yet.
So, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
you
By the
haven't
end of
been to
this, I'll just
Fargo
give you some
Pinball
money.
yet.
So, so tell me, what do people need to know when they go into a pinball game, especially like some of these great stores like Fargo Pinball, where you can go and, gosh, there's game after game after game, but there might be one that you want to play in particular that's got a line to it. What are the polite caveats?
Ins and outs of politely saying, "Hey, let me in," buddy.
Yeah, that'd be the one.
No, we and my brother and I, when we've gone to Chicago to the expo, we've run into this where it'll be like a line of like 20, 30 people who want to try out the newest machine to determine if they want to buy it or not. It's always, if you do see people behind you, finish your game, of course, and then invite them to go, unless you have credits still on the machine. In which case, you could always be like, "Hey, give me $1, and maybe let's go at it. I've got some credits here." If you've got a major line, it's always good to play a 4-player game, because it's always fun to play with someone else instead of playing by yourself. So you've got 4 people going at it in a game, and then you rotate out 4 people at a time. But there will be some people who just sit on the machine and just sit and sit. And you can challenge them, is what I've told people to do. Is say like, "Hey, I challenge you. Let's see what we can do," just to kind of maybe irk them into.
Is there something where I can put a quarter on the machine and like keep
Yes.
my place, or is that uncouth?
No, so that was primarily with like the arcade games, which you would set a quarter up on like Donkey Kong or something. Say, "Hey, this is my quarter. I got next."
Yeah.
In pinball, we've got what are called beer seals underneath the front of the machine. So if you put your quarter, it might slide down into it. But it's usually just to be like, "Hey, can I get next, or can I challenge you?" And then go from there is what I recommend. Or if there's a crazy line, invite 4 people to play, and then rotate the next 4 in.
I was going to say, I don't understand how multiplayer pinball. I've never playing against 3 or 4 people. How does that work?
Well, in the classic era games, they would actually have the displays on the back glass that would be, you'd have all 4 players' potential displays, so you could see at one time the scores as they were being accumulated, so you could see who was in the lead. Now it just on the newer machines, it would just rotate. When it's
Is
when
everyone
you
on
lose
their own machine, or are you taking?
No,
turns?
you're just taking turns on the. We're talking about taking turns on one table.
Yeah, think like original Mario.
Okay.
So it's like, "Oh, I died. Well, it's
So you get the next ball.
Luigi's turn now. Go.
Got it. Okay.
And then you keep going until you run out of. You basically, in general, it's 3 balls per play, and so like, I would play first ball, my first ball, then you would play your first ball, I would play my second ball, you would play your second ball, and then you would basically just be competing on score, who can get the highest score, or if you get high enough, you get a knocker, which is a nice loud sound.
That's the best sound you can hear in a pinball arcade. It's a physical knock inside the cabinet, like a loud, sharp, like the crack of a baseball bat almost, that lets you know that you've got credits. Like you just earned a free game, or when you lose, they have the match. It was that was really a popular thing in the 90s because all the DMD displays would have their own animated graphics for what would make that match. And so if you were down to your last quarter, you'd wait and see, and if it matched and you got the knock, then you'd get a fresh new game.
And the idea was that everybody in the bar would then recognize how awesome you are at pinball because the noise was loud enough to basically get a few people turning heads and going, "Hey, this guy's a real Tommy over here."
And so some people might say, well, wouldn't it just, if you've got a huge long line of pinball machines, wouldn't it just be easier to build a platform and you put the cabinet on it rather than having them on legs? But you're allowed a certain amount of motion on a pinball game, correct?
Oh, yeah. You got to dance with it. You just grab it and just start. And literally, that's, we've had kids in there who, shake the machines, and their folks will say, "Oh, no, you can't shake them." And I'm like, "No, you're supposed to shake them. It's okay. Don't worry. These have survived the 90s bars."
To the point of tilting it.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing is you have to you put a little English on it so that you can get the ball to try to go your way. And that's,
tilting it is when you've crossed the line,
right?
You've gone too far, and there's a sensor it's basically a swinging pendulum inside the machine, which is called plumb bob, and when it makes an electrical contact inside, it just kills everything in the machine until your ball drains. So nudging, for example, is what it's called. And for example, if you can tell that the ball is going to go straight down the middle, if you nudge it just a little bit, just to barely get a tish of the flipper on it, you can move the trajectory carry it over to your other flipper to save your ball. So it is definitely part of pinball. And then, but what's interesting, of course, is in the whole coin-operated world, operators can adjust how sensitive they are. And so if someone's got a collectible machine and it's shrink wrapped and they don't want anybody to ever touch it, they may crank it up so that if you just look at it wrong, it'll tilt. And tilting's also, it makes a lot of noise, especially when you tilt. It's another one of those bar scenes where it's like, that is not a Tommy. He just tilted.
Right. That's a Tommy. That's not a Tommy.
Tilt is a term.
Frankie, Tommy's cousin.
Tilt is a term used in poker, and I have always wondered if it has a connection to pinballs, because when you're playing poker, if you're on tilt, you're playing poorly. If you're on tilt and you're playing poker, that means your emotions are getting the best of you.
Yes.
And so you're making really poor decisions based on that. Does that sound connected to pinball at all?
It does, because I've seen a lot of people who get very upset and lose control of their emotions and just push the machine too far and tilt it. So actually you mentioned that, absolutely. When people lose it, they hoot and holler and tilt out.
When Tucker was telling me that we were going to be able to have you on, Bill and Greg, to talk about pinball, my first thought was one of my favorite pinball in mass media is the animation that they put in Sesame Street with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And, of course, you learn the numbers 1 through 12, and then they, 7. So obviously, pinball is something that really captures people's imagination, and they really get excited. Have you had a chance, Greg? Do you raise your kids to be pinball fanatics?
Yeah, I mean, they know we don't have a pinball game at home, but we do have I have a MAME emulator in a Fix-It Felix cabinet.
Ooh,
that
nice.
which is really nice. I bought it from a local guy who had when Wreck-It Ralph came out, he did one from a kit for his kids. So it's just mint. It's just a really nice machine. I do want to replace the joystick because the joystick contacts aren't the greatest right now. And that has probably like 40 or so of the top classic early 80s coin ops. So all the Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong 3, and then all the Pac-Mans, every single one of the Pac-Mans. And then a few
Burger
favorites
Time?
like Burger Time, absolutely, Galaga. It doesn't have Joust. It's missing a few things. I'd love it if it had Rampage. I played a lot of Rampage.
Dig Dug?
But it does have Dig Dug, has Mr. Dew's Castle.
Bosconian?
I don't think it has Bosconian.
See, that
on
I
this one.
always look for Bosconian whenever I go, and I almost never ever find it. But that's the game
Yeah.
I always want to play.
Yeah, it has Xevious. It has a lot of the shooting space games. Gyrus, Xevious in there, Galaxian, Space Invaders, the original.
Oh, that's
So it's fun, but I would like to take my kids more frequently to Fargo Pinball, and we've done it a few times, and they'll sometimes say, hey, can we go do that, because they enjoy it. Although when they're there, sometimes they gravitate towards the arcade games rather than the pinball tables. But that'll change, I hope.
So in this interview, I've already brought up poker and I brought up slot machines. So clearly, I spend a lot of time in Vegas. And one of the last times I was in Vegas, I went to the Pinball Museum,
Pinball Hall of Fame.
Pinball Hall of Fame
Yep.
in Vegas, and this one of the most fun experiences I've ever had. You walk up to it, and it's like a gray slab box, and with like a shitty sign outside, like the letters are falling off and stuff. And then you walk in, and there are obviously it's full of pinball machines from back when before they were like branding them with franchises and stuff.
Right. There's like all the old tables.
There's an old Nickelodeon in there.
Yeah.
There's a couple old arcade
Electromechanical
games, and they
tables,
would
yeah.
sell like throwback sodas, like throwback Pepsi and stuff like that. Is there dreams for something like that you'd like to see Fargo Pinball grow into? Like if you had your druthers, the space and the budget to put whatever you were hoping to put in there, what's the perfect pinball location design in your mind?
Oh my goodness, you have where we're at is very nondescript, and the Pinball Hall of Fame is also very nondescript. So I like that idea of it's kind of a
it's a membership based club.
yes. Although
In Fargo.
it is, and you can go get. Although we do have passes at the visitor center for people who are in
Which is
town
very
or
cool. Very
who
cool thing to do.
who want to go check it out. And of course that helps pay the rent and all that good stuff. But it would be that nondescript sort of speakeasy hole in the wall look to it, where you're like, what am I getting myself into? In our case, we look kind of like a dentist office, and it would be that. It would be multi-tiered. It would be basically all the hits, with some of the rare ones that are out there. There's like a Kingpin pinball machine that's out there. King Kong is another one that's out there. And the Pinball Hall of Fame has a machine called Python's Pinball Circus, which is an extraordinarily rare machine that you can basically only play it there. There's a Big Bang Bar, which was a space bar themed machine. So it would be multi-leveled. It would be some nice color changing neon. Some casino flooring, no windows because you don't want people to know what time it is. You just want them to keep gaming.
The only thing I think Hall of Fame was
There's
missing was
no glare on the glass.
I wanted to buy pizza while I was there. That was like the one thing I really wanted it to have. Would
They
be
do kind of go hand in hand. It seems like to have
pizza and sodas and pinball.
Mm-hmm.
Have any of you been to Up Down Minneapolis yet?
I haven't been there
Not
yet.
yet.
I know some folks who've been.
I met the people who own it at Expo, and they were super nice. And I have family in Minneapolis, so it's always like when you go to Minneapolis, for us, it's very family oriented time, so we don't get a lot of time to do that. But Up Down's very cool. There's a bunch of there's Tilt in Minneapolis, which a friend of mine now, John, runs, and it's unbelievable as well. They get all the new titles there, and it's and in Fargo here we're getting Pixels Brewery.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that.
And I met with Nick to kind of get an idea of what they're doing, because so we have a couple pinball or arcade machines. We have 4 arcade machines
Right.
at Fargo Pinball, and their primary focus is arcade, and so they're talking about having just like a couple pinball machines.
Yeah.
So we're trying to work with them to see if we can help, because the kicker is always the kicker, which is also a pinball term.
Yep.
Is service is always because they're classic cars that don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So we're working with them to see about getting some machines in there that we can take care of for them. But getting back to it, nondescript, jam in there as many pinball machines as I could. A nice solid surface floor, make it easy to clean. which is interesting because, you know, if you asked me that before I did Fargo Pinball, I wouldn't be like, well, you got to make sure you have enough fire extinguishers. Let's make sure we have a floor that's easy to clean. Make sure all the bathrooms are easily accessible. Things like that, which is interesting because back in the collector days, it's like, I got to have this machine. I got to have this machine. I don't care. It can be in a Quonset in the middle of nowhere. We're going to have it, and we're going to have all these machines.
Is
awesome.
part of your business plan to provide service for a private collector?
We do for new machines we sell.
For new machines that you sell as a dealer for Stern.
Yes, for Stern or Jersey Jack Pinball.
You're doing Jersey Jack as well.
We do both now. They approached us and said, "Hey, we heard you sell for these guys. Could you sell for us?"
So if a person wanted to buy, like my dream is to have a pinball game at home. If I purchase it through you, you would also be able to do some of the maintenance for someone who's not mechanically or inclined towards, you know, the engineering and soldering and all
burning
that, and all that stuff.
Burning.
Here's a question that has always plagued me. Do you unplug the machines at night? And if you do, what happens to the high score on some of those machines?
So after watching Maximum Overdrive, I make sure they're always off as often as I can. Actually, no, it's funny you mention that. So we have this idea of being green and saving green. So all our machines, we converted over to LED lights, and we also installed these power misers, is what they're called, which are basically, think of them as power strips on motion sensors. So whenever nobody's in there at night, or even during the day if nobody's there, all the machines shut down. But the great thing is the machines have AAA batteries, or they have these NVRAM chips that basically save the high scores forever until, you know, if we would happen to miss one, and it would wear out, and then it would go away.
But it requires very little power to retain the high score.
Correct. Yeah. So. It's like your garage door opener at home. You know, the battery makes, you know, little chip or a little capacitor just holds enough power to make sure it remembers. So
what are the busiest and least busy times?
Busiest are the weekends.
Weekends are busy.
Yeah, mid-weekends and not overly busy. We've always had this kind of slow growth to make sure it's comfortable for everybody. But a lot of kids on the weekends, which is awesome. Least busy would be like 6 a.m. I think we only get one or two guys that come in at 6 a.m.
But people can play. Like I'm an introvert that would prefer to play when no one's around. And I know some people prefer to play when there's lots of people around. And so I would tend to be the guy who would show up at 6 a.m. to play pinball. So I could do that.
Midday weekdays is pretty quiet, and it's interesting because you go in there and you have the moment where you walk around and literally all the machines, because they're on the motion sensors, they all start firing up, and you're like, I have arrived. You will power on for me now as I will play you.
Does Twin Galaxies track scores in pinball games, or are they only non-pinball?
Good question.
I don't know. I mean, I love what they do, and watching King of Kong. That's when I got introduced.
Best. King of Kong is so good.
Yes.
Have you been following some of the recent controversies now
No,
with Twin Galaxies?
I'm dying.
By recent, I'm saying within the past probably 4 months that I've seen a lot of YouTube videos pop up that are alleging that Billy Mitchell and a few other of like the kings of Twin Galaxies have fraudulent scores. And so I think the one for Billy was it was one of the Donkey Kong machines. I can't remember which particular Donkey Kong it was, but he was, like you see in the movie, he likes to videotape his play and then send it in. He almost never does it live. Mm-hmm. And he there was controversy over whether or not he was playing on an original motherboard or if he was playing on a MAME machine. And he was saying, no, I was playing on the original motherboard. And someone was able to take the footage and prove that no, you were playing on a MAME machine because the sprite load up at the beginning of every level works differently in the MAME emulator versus an actual motherboard. So they proved that he was using a MAME emulator, which obviously it's super simple to cheat at that. Yeah. You can just record your play and go back and or pause or reset to whatever you want.
Right.
I forget the other guy who has now done that, but there are a bunch of scores that, you know, either it gets entered by a referee at a competition and it says that, or it gets entered by a member of staff at Twin Galaxies at their discretion. And these were all scores that were added in that way. So now there's a lot of guys whose their scores are getting taken down, including Billy Mitchell, or at least being disputed in public. And I was wondering if there's any sort of thing like that in the pinball world that this kind of drama follows around, or no?
Not that I know of. I mean, a lot of the bigger scores and stuff are built around live events. So it's always the governing body like the IFPA or PAPA, the Professional Pinball Players Association. If I remember, I said,
Yep.
I'm not sure. Thank you.
That's right.
They're there and they hold the sanctioned tournaments. And so that's kind of where most of the higher end, you can see the higher end scores. I'm not familiar of there's different leagues, of course, around the U.S. We have a league here in Fargo, and there's a league in Manitoba, so they record scores that way. But as far as cheating on the scores, I'm not even, unless the unless the glass is off and you're just like nailing a switch, like I'm doing it. This is my day. But actually, because it's interesting you mentioned that, because in King of Kong, Steve Wiebe, when they came out to look at the motherboard and the machine, and are like, so it's interesting because with some of that, with the and I'm gonna do my pinball versus arcade plug. But they're both great. Someone could take the chips off the board and manipulate
the right gummy substance on the right diode.
Yep, you could take the chips off the board and you could have code entered into an original machine that would allow you to manipulate the scores. Yeah. So I always say, if it's not live, it's no good. So
versus with a pinball game, it's you're either good at it or you're not.
You're either good at it or you're not quite good at it. We never I never like to say nobody.
Oh, okay.
We like to be very inclusive in that there's no bad pinball players. There's just people who've played longer than others.
Have you ever watched me play pinball before, Bill? I'm not sure.
No, there is no bad pinball. It's just some people have played longer than others. So you learn the pinball strategies. You learn how to pass and catch, and it's like the machines have become so deep in rule set that you really like. If you like Dungeons and Dragons and you like deep rule sets, pinball is amazing because the machines have these crazy deep rules that it's like, all right, if I complete this quest, like this multiplier, and collect this character, I can score a quadruple bonus multiplier. But if I do that, I can get 10x by killing the villain or destroying the ring, for example, in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I'm a not good pinball player, and so I will, if I want to learn a game, I'll watch videos of players who are incredibly good at that game, and Papa provides a lot of those. Like Bowen Cairns is super fun to watch. I think he was he on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? There was one world-class pinball player who was the first $1 million winner on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and also happened to be one of the best pinball players in the world.
Oh, the guy who used his final life
to tell his
them
dad
that he's about to be a millionaire.
Yep.
Who was on Laughing? Richard Nixon.
I don't know if that was Bowen or not, but Bowen Cairns he's for me the most fun pinball player to watch because his tutorials are really geared towards clearly explaining this is why you would do this, and this is the kind of shot you would try to do to unlock these things, and this is the order that you would do them in. And that's been, you can get lost in the rabbit hole of watching those on Vimeo or YouTube.
We're trying to get him to Fargo.
To get Bowen to come?
Yes, because he goes around, he's done things around the country.
If he does that, please bring him on the podcast. We'll have you back.
He's absolutely amazing.
We would in a heartbeat. I mean, we're willing to pay to get him here. Mm-hmm. And of course, us pinball community folks would be like, "Oh my goodness!" Not everyone may recognize him, but it would be amazing to have him come in and show and give lessons for people who would like to get better at pinball.
There's no celebrity too small for JG Meets World.
No, none whatsoever. In fact, how do you feel about mailmen? We're getting them
the
in
movie?
Here. Oh, no. Let's not put the cart before the horse. So let's give some plugs here because I think it's time that people, their interest has been piqued. They've heard about pinball now for an hour. They want to get out there and they want to do some flipping.
Have a flipping good time.
The T-shirts must just make themselves at Fargo Pinball.
There is so many innuendos that I tell you, it's a thing of beauty.
It is right. It is, and Bill really kind of runs a wholesome family-oriented pinball place, which kind of gets away from the sleaziness of the 70s era
Of the
decks
s-
that
of
had
the
like
sin
the
ball.
really I mean, there were some
There's
decks
a
that
t-shirt.
as a kid I would try to seek those out just to examine the detailed artwork on them, like Xenon.
Oh, that's
Xenon! I'm
beautiful.
telling you, is the table that it could launch 1,000 imaginations. I mean, it was like a whole story just in the artwork
Or
on that
Dolly
table.
Parton. That's a great machine. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Actually, Ed Robertson and the Bare Naked Ladies just had a post about playing Dolly Parton for a little bit too long. He's a huge pinball fan.
There's an episode of Mr. Belvedere
Yeah.
where they get a pinball machine, and I remember feeling heartbroken because he's addicted to it, and he's about to beat the high score. And what happens that stops it? Like someone unplugs it or something?
Yeah, I
like that?
feel like someone like
whoa.
maybe takes it out, or they trip over the
We'll
plug.
have to look. What game is it? What table is it? We have to find out. That would
Before
be
we end
pretty
this
cool.
podcast, I'm going to Google this right
Okay.
now. We need to
Streaks
know.
on the pinball.
We can't end
Sorry,
this podcast.
I interrupted the upcoming plug.
So let's
I've
plug
been
this.
interrupting JJ this entire
Yeah.
time. It doesn't matter.
If people want to get out there and they want to play some pinball in the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Dilworth, Kindred, Harwood area,
Grand Forks, Manitoba.
I mean they're driving in from all
They
over
are,
the place,
which is,
right?
I'm not kidding you. We have a significant, I mean, I love Canadians. I hate their quarters. I'm just going to put that out there right now. If you hear this, please, use your credit card or American quarters because they jam up the machine.
Yeah, and you've incorporated like new technology. You've got the app that
Yeah.
allows you to get quarters through your.
Yeah, you basically pay with your phone,
phone.
essentially on all the machines, and we've
Oh,
wired them
great!
in.
Now I'm gonna go broke. That was the one thing is when I used to use a Crown Royal bag filled with quarters, and when I run out of coins in my Crown Royal bag, thanks Mom for having me have that. But that would mean that the end of gaming was done. But now if I can pay with my phone,
Especially when you walked around with it tied to your belt.
oh, that's exactly because I felt like I was an adventurer. And
No,
these are my
I-
gold.
I've seen a resurgence in Crown Royal bags.
Have you really?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. I'm not kidding. I'm like,
Awesome.
See, okay, Bill, there's an opportunity for you. You could market a Crown Royal bag, but it could say Fargo Pinball on it.
there's.
I'm telling you, people would like a loot bag. Do you know how much I spend on my Dungeons and Dragons equipment? It is insane. Thank God I am an adult with a job, because my disposable income. Just yesterday, I spent $200 on a replica lightsaber. So you're really hitting on the right people to be purchasing and coming in to be. So it's a member. Fargo Pinball is a membership based.
It is. So in the core is a membership based club where you essentially get a key card.
Fireball.
And you have the access then 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. 7 days a week. You can bring as many people as you want with you. The basic rule we have is it's no alcohol, strictly no alcohol. And if you, like I said, if you want to, we've had businesses bring their teams in for functions to compete against each other. 6 a.m. 1 a.m. It's a blast. It's a flipping good time. If you are not interested in a membership, and to get back, memberships are $45 for the year, and then $20,
Which is a sweet deal.
each year.
Yeah, it's a really good deal.
Well, we wanted to make sure that it was. The machines have gotten extraordinarily expensive, and we want to make sure that it was affordable for anybody who wanted to have access to come in and play. And so if you skip a Starbucks or Caribou, a couple times a month, you can.
Are all your
no
machines
problem.
set so if you wanted to get 3 games, it's $1 for 3 balls?
The newer machines
the newer
are,
machines will give
are
you-
a
get you-
dollar a game or $2 for 3
games, yeah.
Some of the older machines are 50 cents. You get 3 for $1, and then the arcade machines are all a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I remember that's what it was. It was a quarter, $1, and then you find yourself you're like $1.50 for a can of pop. What happened? Where did we go wrong? And so that's we try to keep our prices reasonable and to make it available for as many people as we can. And again, if you're not interested in a membership and you just want to check it out, we've partnered with the FM Visitor Center where you can go in there. And it's $10 for a day pass, and then they have a coupon running now for $5 for a day pass. And that, again, covers as many people as you want to bring with you. So if you wanted to check it out for a day or two, you do that and have a good time and bring the whole family. And like I said, we get a lot of visitors who come through town who are looking for activities to do. And as a parent, that's kind of how it got started, was that in town here, all the machines were basically in bars except for there was one at the airport. So I would go pay for short-term parking at the airport to play pinball. There was a market there for them. We could have paid for that Skyway with a few more pinball machines, but they disappeared. So
listen, I'll get Tim Mahoney on the line. He's still pretty passionate about finding ways to make the parking ramp happen. So
Mr. Belvedere is playing Fireball.
Yes.
Fireball.
And that's the classic electromechanical version.
Very, very popular pinball game.
That was an amazing one. But so Busy Bubbles, they may still have one, but at the time it was all in bars. And in North Dakota, you can't be under 21 in a bar
Right.
And that's how we got going. I mean, I love for kids to play pinball. I love for them to be on their feet. I love for them to be away from some of the technological, digital aspects of today. It's great to have all that stuff at our fingertips, but at the same time, it's still a ton of fun to just knock around a physical ball and relieve some stress.
Also, when was the last time you saw people crowd around a cell phone versus crowd around a pinball machine when somebody's having the game of their lifetime?
Oh, it's like CES. I think that's the only time people would crowd around it.
Right.
And then when they would just bash it on their phones and be like, "Oh, this is the worst thing Apple has done ever. How are they? Where's my headphone jack?"
Do you guys website, Facebook, social media presence? Lay them on us.
I think we have to nowadays, regardless of what you want to do with social media.
It's where the Secretary of State looks. He's like, well, they're not a real business.
Oh no, we've got our license. It's proudly displayed, our amusement operator license.
Well done, sir.
With the state of North Dakota and our sales tax, because we pay sales tax on every quarter that goes into the machine. But yeah, FargoPinball.com, Facebook, Fargo Pinball. We've got, I think I got a Snapchat too, although I still have to figure out how the kids are doing it these days.
Yeah.
But
ever since Kylie Jenner left Snapchat, I just haven't been on there. I mean, why even go there now if you can't see her?
Instagram, we're on there too, although I'm terrible at doing it. It's like, I should really do an Instagram, and then I'm like, well, I've already done Facebook.
But if you
I'm
Google
burnt out
Fargo
for the day.
Pinball,
Yes.
you'll be the guys to find.
If you're in Fargo, and thanks to the wonderful algorithms that Google has, that they know where we are at all times, if you just Google pinball and you're in the Fargo area, it will pop up. And that's actually, it does that thing. You ever noticed on Google when you Google a location, it shows you how busy it is?
Mm-hmm. It has the little grid.
Which I'm still
indicates.
like, all right, well, that's that location thing I agreed to. Apparently, they want to know where I am at all times. And my wife will get on there and can track me and make sure I'm not where I'm not supposed to be. But you can do that with Fargo Pinball, and it'll show you how busy it is. So especially if you
If you want some private time, like
Yeah,
Greg
you
likes.
want some private time with Dolly Parton or Xenon or some other machines, you can go in and have
Neither of which, by the way, are actually at Fargo Pinball.
No, we
Just to clarify.
Actually, that was a question we did an interview with Prairie Public, and that was a question that came up. Is we've noticed we had a Bride of Pinbot at the one time, which is basically a machine.
Did you bring that over from the downtown location? Yeah, because I played that one down there.
That went off to Canada, so that's now in Winnipeg through a private collector who bought it. But that was one of the questions that came up, was the objectifying women
the themes,
in pinball machine, because the target market was teenage boys, and
Yep.
so we really don't have any of those throwbacks.
No, I mean, like that. I wasn't kidding earlier when I said the idea for family friendliness is that, because you told me you wouldn't bring in The Walking Dead, even though you get a lot of requests for it.
Yes.
Just because it might be too intense, too scary for some younger players.
And that's when you look at these hobbies of some of these crazy hobbies that people have, whether it's like there's like an air hockey league out there, and there's all these other different hobbies, especially a collectible thing, is you have to think about the future generation of players and the people who are going to be there to continue what you have a passion for. And that's kind of what we're doing, is we're encouraging the kids, and we want to make sure it's an environment that they can come in and not be afraid of Gorgar like my daughter was, which is just
which we talked about. That was the very first pinball game that I ever saw, and probably that I ever played, was Gorgar.
Yeah, it was the first talking pinball machine, and it's a little creepy, and my daughter was terrified of it.
It would taunt you.
Do you want to go play pinball, honey? No, I do not. And so we don't want to do that. We don't want We don't want to have the clown experience that I have. That if I see a clown, I'm like, oh, I'm out of here. This is not happening today.
So when they license that pinball, that's not going to be coming to
heck
Fargo
no.
Pinball.
No.
Well, listen,
unless
if you
unless it does well, and then we'll
Oh, there you
no,
go.
that's the business side of it. You get to the point, you're like, well, is it going to do well, or are we going to? How's it going to do?
Does McDonald's have a pinball machine?
God,
I'm not saying at a McDonald's. I'm saying
A themed one.
A themed
McDonald
McDonald's.
Land.
Yeah.
Ronald McDonald and the Fry Guys and the Hamburglar.
oh yeah, and Grimace.
Yeah.
Grimace. Yes.
I believe he's the Grimace. I
They've
don't
pretty
think
much
his name
like
is Grimace.
retired those, with the exception of Ronald McDonald House. They're not really using a lot of it in store anymore because of the the challenges to health, obesity problems. Seriously, that's my understanding.
believe
Is
you.
that they just don't. When's the last time you saw a TV commercial that featured those characters? It's been a while.
I knew a guy who, and I swear this is true, dated a girl who was a spitting image of that Birdie character.
Birdie the early bird.
Yeah, like
Wow.
constantly, like might as well have just worn a little pilot's cap
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
Well, if they're role playing,
He would have been shaped like the Grimace.
I just want somebody to run for mayor as Mayor McCheese. It could happen, JJ.
Listen, my last name's Gordon. I could run for commissioner and get
Yep.
close to that with Commissioner Gordon.
I'm still waiting on the Stern Batman '66 game to come to town.
That's been popular, and
It's a yeah.
We're-
It's controversial. It's the reviews aren't that it's the greatest game, but it's got such an incredible theme. The sound and the toys on the playing field.
It does, and I know we're getting a little long here, and I'll just. It's interesting.
That's
Because
the beauty of podcasts.
Oh, yeah,
we
we
could go
can-
for hours.
Oh, really?
That's totally cool. We're fine.
they don't need the studio. We're okay. We're okay.
All you're doing is costing yourself business by not allowing those people to go down there and sign up for their membership.
Well, it's all online. It's
There you go.
through FargoPinball.com.
Please do not navigate away from this page. Wait until the podcast is done, and then you can go to whatever websites you choose.
At the end of the podcast, we'll give you the real site.
Yeah,
It's like that Simpsons episode. It's not 911. It's
yeah. We'll keep resending them back to this spot.
it's just our link is just going to keep coming right back to this.
That's right.
I just want to join.
Gotcha. If someone wants to make a JJ Meets World pinball game, I think that'd be pretty sweet. Are there people out there designing their own games and making these custom jobs?
Yes, there. A lot. There's a Minions pinball machine a group did. There's a guy in the cities, Lloyd at S&S Billiards, who is like, he's been there forever, and he has a Bill Paxton pinball machine.
What?
Yes, that was
I think I
like
saw a photo
That
of that.
follows you
I saw a
through all
photo
of
that.
Bill Paxton's
it's got
career?
all the call outs and stuff.
Chet.
And, game over, man. Game over. Oh my god. Yes.
I feel like a Jeff Goldblum machine would probably be
Yep.
pretty big with kids nowadays.
I've seen some really beautiful stuff that's just kind of vintage pinup art, sort of like devils and
Yep.
things like that people do this really where they're as much into design as they are into pinball, and so it'll look almost. I mean, it's functional art, really. I mean, that's how I've always approached pinball. For me, it's a lot of people are into the gameplay, but for me, it's always the artwork and the theme first, and that's why I'm intrigued by the Batman '66 because it looks so pretty.
Yeah, and to get back to that real quick, the issue that the theme of it is a different generation that grew up with the Batman. So the generation that grew up with the Batman theme was more of the electromechanical, which is not as digital, not as many bells and whistles. So and that's part of why that machine is not, I think, done as well.
Right. 'Cause it's got,
it's a
like-
great machine.
It's
Don't get
got
me
the
wrong.
crane on it, like the penguin crane comes over.
And the Joker, who it's not the Joker of today.
Right.
The Cesar Romero.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, with the stash.
Yes. So it's an interesting game because the theming is geared towards people who grew up with that. But the players nowadays and the future players don't, they're looking for Christian Bale, who's going to talk to you really
I'm not.
slowly.
I'm not.
I'm still looking for Adam West.
Yeah.
That's my.
Just Val Kilmer. That's fine.
Play the game. Now, Batman the Animated Series, I could get behind that pinball game. Big time. Yeah.
Mark Hamill was the Joker.
Yep,
in that,
Joker.
wasn't he?
Maybe the best voice of the Joker.
My
that
favorite
you'll
Joker.
ever get. Come on, bats. Bill Brooks, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your
you.
love of pinball. Greg, thank you for being
Thanks
a
for
super
having me.
pinball
and
fan.
Very fun.
Again, give us the website that they can go to for Fargo Pinball.
They can go to now for Fargo.
Yes.
It's not active until now.
Correct.
Yes. There's a whole.
There's a media blackout for
There's
it.
an algorithm out there. There's a algorithm company in England that is scraping through and making sure you're supposed to be here instead of at www.fargopinball.com.
I like that. Greg, if people want to check out your stuff, where can they find some Greg Carlson things?
southpawfilmworks.org is my blog that contains all the writing that I do for the High Plains Reader. So
great.
every week a new movie.
Every single
week for almost 20 years.
That's going to be its own podcast. I think we got to do that at some point.
Yeah, we'll
That would
just
be
read
awesome.
excerpts and see if you can name
It
the
would
movie.
be fun. I think one of my favorite reviews is you have to look up my review for Bad Boys 2.
Yes.
I think I was just on fire when my concluding line of that review is as good as it gets for my writing, which whatever that means.
It's Martin Lawrence's greatest
This
movie.
week I reviewed Blockers, which was really entertaining.
I heard it was
recommend.
good.
I recommend.
That is incredibly surprising because every time I've seen that trailer, I thought to
Same
myself,
here.
this movie looks like garbage.
Everyone I've talked to has said the same thing, that the trailer does not reveal what the movie will really deliver.
Well, I look forward to seeing that and then playing the pinball game based upon the movie starring John Cena. Thanks, guys, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. For more info, including how you can help us keep the lights on by donating to our Patreon, visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit us up on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites that you fancy kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcasts that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you're interested in contacting JJ, and let's face it, who isn't? You can go to www.linebenders.com. I am always just slightly worried when I wear jeans that have holes in them because people are going to wonder, did he put those holes in there or did he buy them with the holes in them already? And I don't like for people to have anxiety like that when I'm around, so I either wear no pants or full pants. There's no in between for me. So if you see me with holes in my jeans, I'm probably being kidnapped.